really when it comes to having to keep track of so many parts and pieces when it comes to international trade or even just the ins and outs of a company and reporting, that's where all of our tools are sort of coming into play for compliance, automation, and support. Look at both of those data sets. Our algorithms are put in place to understand those differentiations and to put out the best data that we see fit, essentially what makes the most sense from that data. And so that's what you'll see reflected in that tool.
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by WriteForMe, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Business Ninjas. Today, I'm here with Devan Conness, Regional Sales Director for North America at TradeSun. How you doing today, Devan?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Appreciate you spending some time with us on Business Ninjas. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and about TradeSun.
Yeah, absolutely. So a bit of background on me. I grew up in Illinois. For a little fun fact there, but I went to school for international business, and I think that was motivated because I wanted to choose a path that sort of satiated the interest I had in what was going on pretty much anywhere else in the world. I wanted to see how global corporations, economies, governments, societies, everything, how they were operating at large. So I wanted to get also as connected as I could, which is why I also then majored in Spanish and the Spanish language. So I had that international business and Spanish component. And then throughout the 7 years that I've been out of school and pursuing a career, no two jobs have really looked the same. I've found myself pivoting and adapting a lot. I've worked for nonprofits, for-profits, government, and I've expanded roles that were very people-facing to also very data driven, research driven, sort of behind the computer all the time. So there's been a lot of different activity, but it's been a great journey. But yes, now I'm at TradeSun and I'm the regional director of sales for North America here.
Sounds like you're trying to find a career where the company will pick up your travel tab. I'm just saying.
Yeah, definitely wouldn't complain about it. I'll say that. But yeah, that has been a nice perk of some jobs in the past. Some travel has been involved, and TradeSun too. I mean, I've already traveled out to San Francisco. I'm based in Chicago, but I've traveled out to San Francisco for a conference, and I have a couple of other conferences on the horizon where I'll be getting on a plane and heading somewhere. So excited for that too.
Excellent. All right. So tell us a little bit about TradeSun and what they do.
Yeah, so TradeSun, we have a number of different products that we're focused on. So I think for the purpose of our conversation today, I'm going to focus just on one of them that's a bit more applicable to kind of a wider audience and doesn't require a glossary of vocabulary, but we have three different products. So one is our CoriolisESG is what we call it. And that is the product I'll focus on for our conversation. So CoriolisESG is essentially an automated ESG risk assessment scoring system. So any company or business that's looking to assess their ESG standing, ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance, for those listening who might not know. And it is quickly becoming a regulatory standard globally for companies to have essentially a risk score attached to them or an understanding of their ESG activities and to be reporting on them. So what TradeSun is doing is we are taking a system that has been entirely done by manual labor. So a company has filled out an assessment form, sent it to analysts, via snail mail. They've analyzed it for a couple hours and then generate essentially a score for this company. What we're doing is we don't require any interaction with the company in question. And so we can pull information from a number of different private and public sources, and then take that data and score it against the regulatory standards that are already put in place. And those that are put in place are coming from the United Nations they have something called the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them that have laid out, and nations all around the world have signed on in agreements to comply with them. So essentially, we have the data on the company, and the Sustainable Development Goals from the UN lay out how we can essentially assess if a company is having a negative, positive, or neutral impact on a specific criteria. And so we're using that, I suppose, structure to develop a score for a company. So I'm trying not to get too thick in the weeds, I suppose, but it's kind of tough. There's a lot of background and context to provide, but that's one product. Another product that we have is called Multilateral. And so that is essentially for any company or executive who's wanting to explore a new export market. We have import and export market data for all over the world, dating many years back for all sorts of industries. The third product we have is what we just call TradeSun, kind of our flagship product. Essentially, we upload all of the different documents involved in trade finance, a trade finance interaction, and we can screen for compliance. So that means that we're looking at anti-money laundering, we're looking at sanctions checking, and the like. So that's a whole other software system that we have. And so those are the three products sort of making up our suite. And we're working with companies, banks, financial institutions without borders, essentially, all around the world in any sector, because everything that we're working on is pretty much applicable to any company. So
excellent. Hey, that explains the name of the company, because you're illuminating these subjects. I mean, ESG is on the tip of everybody's tongue. It is a tentative time in terms of when people are investing their money. Things are tight, 7%, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes it's hard to follow the chain of who owns the company you want to invest in. So having a service like yours that illuminates what's really going on and how people are behaving all the way up the food chain is very important.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the ESG product that we're having, that is really that illuminator to even a company's entire supply chain as well. I mean, sometimes a company can have thousands and thousands of companies that are a part of their supply chain, and it's really hard to get oversight over what every single company is doing. So yes, what you mentioned, ESG is sort of a hot topic of conversation for a lot of reasons. I think especially in the States, it looks different in other regions around the world, but ultimately investing in ESG from our standpoint is really a risk mitigation to mitigate risk against profitability for your company, because not only is there something like reputational risk involved, but there are ways to flag risks that can prohibit profiteering or profit making for a company in the realm of ESG. So we're just here to have some transparency and help with companies who are looking to comply with regulations that are out there and forthcoming as well.
Hey, and I hope that, maybe the tail gets to wag the dog, and that because some companies that weren't necessarily behaving themselves are aware that services like yours are coming to the forefront, they're going to have to pull up their socks and behave in a different way. So maybe there's the potential that by shedding a light on what they're doing, you're going to force them to behave in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, this process of automating an ESG score is not only that time saver that I've mentioned. I mean, having to move from a manual process of someone at a company filling out an assessment and having to have the knowledge of all of the products and services that they're putting out, even when it comes down to, current criteria that are requiring scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions reporting. That's really tough information to gather. And it takes away that burden from that company to fill everything out and know everything about their company. It's a time saver. But then also when that's passed on to analysts, it really eliminates the potential for human error or human bias that are just naturally occurring phenomenons in this world, And so I think having a streamlined system really allows for a standardized approach across the world for companies So we're excited for the future.
Excellent. And what's the origin story at TradeSun? How long they've been in business?
TradeSun started officially in 2018, but Nigel Hook is the founder and CEO of TradeSun, and his backstory is actually pretty interesting. He grew up in England near Bletchley Park, I believe it's called, which is actually where during World War II, a man named Alan Turing got his fame cracking Nazi codes, actually. And so growing up in that area, he was pretty much just exposed to that story there, and he was inspired to become a student of AI. And since sort of getting involved in AI, studying it, it was really the driving force of his career ever since. And so back in 1981, he started a company called DataSkill that partnered with IBM on the Deep Blue technology, which was also famously connected with the chess tournament. And so down the line, it was from that partnership with IBM that he learned of and started working on a solution for structuring unstructured documents that were involved in trade, analyzing those documents for compliance and thorough risk assessment, all through computing, AI, and automation. So that was all back in about 2013 that he kind of started working on that. But as I mentioned, TradeSun was really born in 2018. And as part of its successful growth then in recent years, last December 2022, TradeSun acquired a company called Coriolis Technologies Unlimited, which is what gained us 2 additional products to its suite, the multilateral platform, as well as the CoriolisESG tool, which is again what I've been highlighting. Yeah.
Excellent. And what verticals are you servicing with these tools?
Well, as I mentioned, pretty much everything. Really any company in any sector and any bank or financial institution. So I think right now our focus has been a lot on banks and financial institutions with the ESG product, as it's very pertinent for their interaction with companies for financing and trade interactions. So that's sort of been the angle that we've been taking right now for ESG, but the sky's the limit really, because I think ESG compliance is relevant for any company in any sector. So it's wide open.
Excellent. And aside from just surfacing up ESG statistics, what are the most common problems you're solving for clients?
So I think that a couple of the challenges that companies are coming across right now, especially in the realm of ESG, is that regulation has not yet been made clear in the US in terms of what companies are required to comply by and what they don't have to, and by when. So a lot of companies and banks are just waiting to see what they're going to be required to do. There's guidance that we can provide in terms of how they can be compliant across the board. So I'll give an example. When we're working with a bank who might be supporting a trade finance interaction, or essentially, financing an import or an export for a company, they have to be aware of the risk that is associated with any trade financing transaction. Because if there is a US company that's going to be exporting to Germany, for example, at the moment, there might not be clear regulation around what it is that US company might need to be following in terms of ESG. However, there are clear regulations put into place for the EU, which Germany would be following. So in this instance of this trade interaction, the company that is based in the US that's exporting would have to be compliant with those EU standards of regulation for those goods to be accepted in Europe when they get there. So the company would have to be compliant, the goods would have to be compliant with EU standards. And that's a risk on the bank who's financing that transaction to understand how that company is falling within those compliance guidelines. And obviously it's on the company as well. I think banks can run into reputational risk when they are funding a trade transaction where there was oversight on a company's actual activities, and it can be found out that a bank was supporting the activity of a company that had some malicious activity happening, or weren't following sanctions or something like that. But so in this instance, we're really helping to be compliant across the board and eliminate those risks, essentially, or at least have oversight of those risks.
That gets difficult when you get into international finance because, the lines in the sand are different on both ends of the equation. And, people are financing through various other countries and things like that. So it gets very murky, and you guys are performing an important role in terms of shedding light on what's really going on in these transactions.
It's an absolute beast. It really is. And so, yeah, we like to consider ourselves a partner in that. And yeah, I mean, really, when it comes to having to keep track of so many parts and pieces when it comes to international trade, or even just the ins and outs of a company and reporting, that's where all of our tools are sort of coming into play for compliance, automation, and support.
I assume you have some competition in this space. What differentiates you? What makes TradeSun stand out?
Sure, it looks different. Competition looks different for each product. There are a number of different players in the game. I think what I've mentioned before for the ESG product, that it's automated. It's actually the only automated product in the world as it stands right now. So I think that's its major differentiation, is the automated component, that a company can get its own score its entire supply chain of thousands of companies in 30 seconds to 2 minutes rather than weeks and weeks. So I think that's the main differentiating factor. When it comes to any other product, for example, the multilateral product that we have, that is for companies to assess new export markets. Really, I think the differentiating factor there, amongst other competitors, is the data that we're sourcing is put through a series of our own internal algorithms and what we call a mirroring effect. Mm-hmm. So traditionally, when import-export data is reported by governments, it is one directional. So they might only report on what's coming in, what has been imported into their country. And what we're doing is we're looking at not only what's been reported to come into the country, but what another country has reported to go out to that country. To put it into an example, we'll bring in Germany again, Germany and Ghana. If you're wanting to understand the trade between Germany and Ghana, you could look to see what Ghana is reporting that they're receiving from Germany. But when it comes to a standardized reporting methodologies, Germany might be a little bit more reliable than Ghana in reporting what they're exporting and importing. So we'll look not only at what Ghana says they're receiving from Germany, but what Germany says they're exporting to Ghana specifically. Look at both of those data sets, and our algorithms are put in place to understand those differentiations and to put out the best data that we see fit, essentially what makes the most sense from that data. And so that's what you'll see reflected in that tool.
Gotcha. All right, switch gears a little bit. What role has content played in the growth of TradeSun? How are you telling your story here in 2023?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think content marketing has really enabled us to demonstrate thought leadership, particularly for companies and senior managers that are trying to figure out what regulators, shareholders, and consumers are wanting and requiring from them. And I would say that that's the main area that content marketing is playing for us.
Excellent. All right. Fast forward a year from today. What's something you'd like to be celebrating personally and professionally?
Personally and professionally. I think professionally, as a company or, as a collective team, I think it's just supporting more companies on their ESG risk mitigating journey. Also, I think it would be great to see continued funding coming in for TradeSun. We're working on closing a Series B at the moment, so it would be great to, maybe see a Series C closed or in development a year from now as well. Personally, I wasn't prepared for this one. Personally, yeah, on a personal note, I think I would like to be celebrating just all of the opportunities that have come with a position such as this. I think being a regional manager has come with its challenges in a professional world for me, and I think that it'll be great to see how much I've grown into the role and been able to. Yeah, I'll say that. It'll be great to see how much I've been able to grow into the role a year from now and how much I've learned.
Well, please tell us your URL where people can find TradeSun and what social media channels you're using these days.
Absolutely. So for me, I think the best route is going to be on LinkedIn, and likewise for TradeSun. So I can share those links, or I would just say find me, Devan Conness, on LinkedIn, or TradeSun on LinkedIn, and go ahead and follow. You can connect with me. I'd be happy to have any conversations. I'm happy to receive messages. I'm on LinkedIn every day, multiple times throughout the day. So it's an easy place to reach me, and we can get connected over email, and happy to have conversations about any of the products I mentioned, or if you just have questions about trying to be compliant or what the heck is going on with ESG in the US, I would be happy to have a conversation. So
excellent. Devan Conness of TradeSun, I wish you and TradeSun all the best in the future. I appreciate what you're out there doing. Shedding a light on this subject is important, and I thank you for it. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.